BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello and welcome to the Farming Today podcast with me, Charlotte Smith. In this episode, could relaxing environmental rules help avoid wildfires?
Controlled burning, there's a number of benefits. When done properly, not only does it decrease the fire load on the hill, but also it can be beneficial, for both wildlife habitats and biodiversity.
First, there aren't many crops which have a strong association with seasonality, Brussels sprouts being an exception, of course. But the first asparagus of the season is one vegetable that's widely anticipated and valued. Well, one Scottish farm has found a way of edging ahead of most of the others by making use of redundant fruit polytunnels, as Nancy Nicholson's been finding out.
So it's been pretty warm yesterday and today, so we've got some good-looking, tall, thicker spears here.
It is a stunning spring morning in Strathmore, Perthshire's great fertile glen, which is best known really for soft fruit and potato production. But the crop that is being harvested in this polytunnel is asparagus, and James Neal is walking down the tunnel with me while there are three people here picking asparagus.
We had hydroponic raspberries in here originally, but as the soft fruit game became harder and less of a margin in it, we took the soft fruit out, and we had already put some asparagus in lighter ground outdoors, and the tunnel structure is a permanent structure here, so it has worked.
It certainly has. It looks really productive. You've got 3 rows of asparagus and it's all at different heights, obviously.
On a really warm day, asparagus can be shifting sort of 10 to 12 centimetres a day. So we're through here every day, just taking out the stuff that's at the perfect height for us. You can see the guys being extremely careful. They've got to be very agile with the knife and make sure and not touch the asparagus, because that is what creates some of our wonky asparagus. But the stuff that's got a little bit of a kink and a bit of character, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it.
Character vegetables, very good. What this gives you, this polytunnel gives you really early asparagus, and that's your big selling point, isn't it?
Yeah. It's letting us extend our season. We use 3 different varieties and a purple variety, Gingium, Millennium and Aspelin, and they all come at slightly different times, and then it's the same varieties outside.
I'm Lauren, James's sister. We're very much a family business here, and I head up all of the direct sales of our asparagus.
Okay, and we've just come into the pack house, Lauren, and the biggest bit of kit we're looking at is this. It looks like a washer. What's going on here?
Our washer grader system here washes the asparagus, grades it into specific sizes before our team of packers grade and band for our different specs.
Obviously a very specific bit of kit, because it's got little pouches for each single spear of asparagus.
Obviously we've got thick spears, thin spears, wonky spears. It standardises all of our lengths before it then goes through a laser system that separates into our different specifications. So we cannot mix spear sizes in bundles. We very much grade into medium stems, thin stems, large, and then our wonky is separated. So the job of the packers here is to make sure that they are separating each of these specs out.
It just looks so sparkling, fresh and clean. And James, you're looking on here as well. It is seen as a bit of a luxury, asparagus, isn't it? Looking at what's going on here and getting it to the precise size for packing, it explains quite a lot.
To do what we're trying to do here and get it cut the same day and out to our customers either same day or next day, it costs a lot more as well with the logistics of it. But the difference in flavour between that asparagus, as soon as it's cut, the sugars and the flavours are evolving in that the whole time, and unfortunately they're degrading as opposed to getting better. So the sooner we get it to our customers, the fresher and the better it tastes.
James Neal on asparagus. Well, we're focusing on farmed fish this week, and salmon really dominates this sector. The industry in Scotland says it's continuing to change and improve. Well, for the second of his reports from Scotland's west coast, Richard Baines took a boat trip out to another site owned by the Norwegian fish farmer MOWI to find out about what some see as the future for the industry.
I'm on a fast launch in a heavy swell, heading to a fish farm near the island of Colonsay, west of Jura. It's very different out here to the calm loch waters of a traditional Scottish salmon farm.
Well, this is an open water site, a great environment.
This is one of a string of MOWI offshore sites. Ali Geddes is the site manager.
It's a challenging place to work. You need the right equipment and you need the right crew. You're constantly looking at the weather forecast to see what's coming and then assessing what you can do in the day. This is our lab. Every morning we come out, we do the environmental checks. So we've got underwater cameras, surface cameras.
We're just looking initially for fish hunting the feed rather than just shoaling on the surface.
Liam McNeil monitors the cameras.
Just now you can see a couple on the camera. We're just sort of watching that, following it down to around about a depth of 10 metres. Anything below that we will just stop the feeding for a minute, and then if they don't reappear then that's that meal done. It's just getting your eye in, knowing and learning fish behaviour.
MOWI's just bought the island of Sander near Campbelltown as a base for another offshore site, and their plans are part of a growing trend. The Norwegian firm SalMar is reported to be exploring salmon farm sites 3 miles off Shetland. Such sites with strong currents in deep water can avoid concentrations of waste on the seabed. Dougie Hunter is MOWI's technical director in Scotland.
The fish are very robust in where they are. The currents and the wind action and wave action makes the fish very strong. The depths of the nets are about 20 metres, so they've got lots of space in that area to actually choose where they want to go in the water column. By nature of where we are, there's less sort of birds out there, there's less seals out there. We're about sort of 20 miles away from the mainland, so we don't tend to typically see many lice out in this location.
Despite the challenges, Ben Hadfield, the MOWI Scotland Chief Operating Officer, says this is the future.
We see that our expansion is to be in open sea areas where the assimilative capacity is a lot higher, the wastes are taken care of by the environment within environmental limits, and we see that as the area for growth in our sector.
Campaigners against salmon farms say offshore sites are merely shifting problems out of sight. But Hadfield says better business goes hand in hand with environmental care.
Most of the people that work in this sector are biologists, veterinary professionals. They're all environmentalists. They all want to produce the best possible product in the most sustainable way. So we really focus on what's best for the fish, what's best for the environment, and what's best for the communities, and of course what's best for the business.
Ben Hadfield from MOWI there. More on salmon tomorrow when we'll hear from a conservation group which wants to see salmon farms close. Firefighters across the country have been tackling more wildfires this week, from the Mourne Mountains in Northern Ireland to the Scottish Highlands and North Yorkshire moors. As we heard last week, these fires in rural areas are difficult to fight. In the Mournes, more than 140 fires have been reported in the past few days, and firefighters say most were started deliberately. David Doherty is Western Area Commander for the Northern Ireland Fire and Rescue Service. Speaking from Ballygawley in County Tyrone at the site of another wildfire, he said the damage has been considerable, and with some peatland alight, nesting birds and other wildlife have also been affected.
The conditions here are tender dry, so anywhere there is an ember is going to get an ignition source, it is going to burn. You're also dealing with peat bog here, so this can be burning below the surface, which again is quite complex for us to deal with. The issue here is that this is all rural, it's off-road, and it's very difficult for us to get water to it, so the crews have been working extremely hard with knapsack sprayers and beaters here in very arduous conditions to tackle this fire.
Commander David Doherty in Northern Ireland. Well, various countryside organisations, including the Countryside Alliance and the CLA, alongside farming unions, have been raising awareness of the dangers of wildfires and ways of preventing them. The Ulster Farmers Union is calling for more grazing and controlled burning in some protected areas to reduce the risks. I asked John McLenaghan, UFU Deputy President, if some of these fires could have been prevented.
Yeah, well, I suppose we look at what we need for a fire, so there needs to be air, which is obviously there, and a lot of these are on mountains, so there's usually a bit more wind. There needs to be some sort of ignition, and that can be either deliberate or accidental, I suppose. But there also needs to be the material itself, and I suppose that was what we were noticing, and a lot of these fires happening on designated sites, areas where the farmers are restricted in terms of how they can manage the land, where historically they would have grazed that land and used various other methods to control the shrub and the overgrowth on those sides of the hills. Those areas, due to designations, have those techniques have been restricted, and a consequence of that, and it is an unintended consequence of that, is that we just have more of this very combustible material on the hill, and if the conditions are right, we get the unfortunate circumstances that we're seeing at the minute.
So what aren't farmers then allowed to do, which you think would make a difference?
The biggest thing is grazing. I mean, in our designated sites, our farmers have to take their livestock off the hill at the start of November, and they can't put them back until the end of February. So there's a closed grazing period, if you like, lots of designated sites are slightly different, so they might not all be exactly the same, but generally speaking, livestock have to be removed from the 1st of November through to the 28th of February. And the consequence of that is we don't have that selective grazing that we get from sheep in particular and other cattle also on the hill during those winter months, which help to keep that shrub at a managed level, which means there's come the springtime and into the summertime, there's less about for it to combust.
The burning of heather actually is allowed in Northern Ireland between the 1st of September and the 14th of April. I suppose there are two sides to that. Firstly, that would reduce the fuel load, but it is possible that someone doing that may have inadvertently started fire.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, it is. I mean, that controlled burning, there's a number of benefits that we have from that. One of them is to control the fire load. It also has benefits for biodiversity and also for wildlife habitats, and that's been recognised for centuries. And when controlled burning is done properly in a mosaic pattern across a hill, that has many benefits. I mean, there's been no suggestion that any controlled burning has been responsible for any of the fires that we've seen breaking out in some of the areas that has happened over the last couple of weeks. But there is always a risk. We recognise that, and it's why the people who do this need to be properly trained, the farmers, and that training very often is passed on from generation to generation. It's a skill to know when to do it and to know how to do it and to wait for the right weather conditions. And when done properly, not only does it decrease the fire load on the hill, but also it can be also is recognised as being beneficial, for both wildlife habitats and biodiversity. And of course for the shooting industry as well. Yeah, not so much an issue, I would suggest, on many of our hills, as perhaps it is in England, Charlotte. But, like I say, these hills have been managed for generations by farmers, and that, I suppose, is where it's difficult. The reason why they've been designated sites is because of the way they've been so well managed, for generations of farmers. And then once that management is then interfered with, so they're told they can't graze or they can't do controlled burns as they may have done previously, then obviously the habitat changes, and undoubtedly an unintended consequence of that is we increase the fire loading, and that can lead to sort of the devastating consequences we've seen over the last couple of weeks. And that balance is being talked about again because the UK government's looking to extend restrictions on burning on peatland, which makes sense to protect the peat, but will others worry again stop these controlled burns and so on? Do you have concerns about that? Yeah, we certainly would have concerns. I mean, this is the reason why we do it in a particular time. Now, normally, you mentioned the period for controlled burns over here is from the 1st of September to the 14th of April. Now, the reason why it's that time of year is because, generally speaking, and this year has been a bit of an exception, there is still a high degree of moisture, both in the ground and in the plants themselves, so they're not as likely to cause wildfires. One of the good reasons for controlled burning is if it's done at the right time of year, we decrease the risk of having those wildfires, and in that, usually during those summer months when everything is a lot drier, if those wildfires take hold, then the peat starts to burn, and that really can be devastating. John McLenaghan from the Ulster Farmers Union. That's it from us. I'm Charlotte Smith. The producer is Rebecca Rooney, and Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.